Welcome everyone. I'm here to talk about my research. It's interesting to hear a lot about some of the other education related topics. My title is looking at multidisciplinary cybersecurity workforces. And just to give a little bit of context to that, we're all aware of the COVID implications. We've all moved online very rapidly, and that's changed the way we communicate. That's changed the way organizations communicate. And as part of that, we have seen a massive rise in various threats, as we heard about yesterday. But there's other background to this as well, in that particularly in the UK, it's a very big discussion about how cybersecurity is a growing industry, but that cyber professionals are struggling to keep up. Their responsibilities go well beyond what they're capable of, or we're not creating enough new talent to help us to change the conversation from an industry that needs more workforce to an industry that can manage. And so as that demand increases, I think it's what we try to look at is other approaches to filling that demand against the backdrop of a sector that does struggle with recruiting new students into STEM programs, so science, education, technology, and mathematics. And one of the approach I was looking at here, or we were looking at here, sorry, is to consider building cybersecurity teams with other disciplines. So throughout this, I talk about the traditional discipline, referring to computing and IT, but actually that approach isn't working, or not from the perspective I sit in. We're continuing to see increasing skills shortages. And so what we wanted to investigate was whether building a diverse workforce with complementing skills and complementing competencies from a range of backgrounds, whether there's an opportunity to balance the amount of responsibility felt by the cybersecurity teams, so it's not all left to them, whilst also creating a team with a strong skill set that allows for a much more diverse range of problem-solving skills and backgrounds. And so of the challenges we looked to explore as part of this topic, we needed to start thinking about how do we engage people from a range of disciplines of cybersecurity, because there are multiple opportunities, as I'll go on to explain, for other subjects to get involved in the conversation. And the first challenge is, are they aware of that? And initial research has found that there's a stereotype for cybersecurity that 71% of those outside of the industry feel, when they were questioned, feel that this is an area for only smart and technically focused individuals, which is having an impact on an already narrow pipeline of students focusing on this subject. So it's not just about looking at, are those people aware of the possibilities for themselves in cybersecurity, but also do they realize how they can work with the technology-focused individuals to build a more cybersecurity aware culture within an organization. And then the other challenge is looking at this from another perspective. Are those cybersecurity professionals aware of how they can work alongside other professionals and other disciplines to develop much greater value to what they're doing. And so as part of this part of this paper, part of this research, I focused on students at a college in the UK, a vocational college, offering vocational training at both the further education and the higher education end of the spectrum. So the further education is defined as the post-16, and the higher education being similar to the university entry requirements for an undergrad. So a range of age groups from 16 right the way through to those returning to retrain as part of their evening courses, as well as university level degree. And so the first part of this research was to identify, using the NIST cybersecurity workforce framework, crossover areas. So looking at the skills, knowledge, and abilities expected of different work roles defined in this framework, where there might be crossover, where there might be opportunities for other disciplines to be involved, but more importantly, where those same skills and knowledges are taught within curriculums outside of computing. The other objectives involved investigating student awareness levels, so particularly students outside of the computing discipline. Are they aware, and more importantly, are they interested in this topic? And to contrast with that, we focused on computing students as well and asked them the same set of questions in the same way to see whether there's a difference between their responses. And so when we conducted the skills analysis, as I referred to it, we came up with this table here. And this table focused on started out by focusing on four job titles defined in the NIST NICE cybersecurity workforce framework that were deemed to have a significant level of crossover with other disciplines. And as you can see from the table, the knowledge numbers are retained, but the numbers that aren't there are related to the computing disciplines. So these are the knowledge areas purely focused and taught, particularly in other disciplines and other programs of study at a further education and higher education college, within the UK at least. And so you can see here that there were a number of disciplines identified, media students, art and design, which are often combined, particularly within the UK in terms of their vocational curriculums, teacher education programs, political science students, psychology, business, law, and engineering all fell into the categories of knowledge development expected by this workforce framework. And whilst it doesn't cover all of the titles, these were the four that were selected for the highest level of crossover. So what we did, we prepared an initial presentation and sent it out to these four non-traditional disciplines, as well as the more traditional computing and IT discipline areas within a single education facility in the UK. Because of the restrictions of accessing students through teams that weren't in departments that I teach in, it was left as a purely voluntary option. So I'm pleased to report we got 88 participants, and you can see the breakdown of those students and the respondents from each area, with most number of responses coming from teacher education and business settings. Now, one of the first questions we asked was about where they have heard the term cybersecurity before, and approximately 50% reported having heard about it in school and colleges, which to me would indicate that we need to be focused on this area to help develop our pipeline of students. And when asked a further question about the job or where cybersecurity knowledge fits, 52% reported that they felt that all job roles required some basic knowledge of cybersecurity, regardless of what they've learned previously as part of their vocational curriculum. Of that, 31% are from the non-computing curriculums, with 21% believing that from the traditional routes. I think there's someone speaking online. In contrast, though, there was a high percentage of students reporting that they felt that cybersecurity is limited to only a specialist role or area in IT, which when you look at the other breakdown of students from non-computing disciplines, only 27% had a similar feeling, which was surprising, but definitely forced the teachers in computing to recognize the fact that maybe there needs to be more work to develop computing as a topic to explore this subject as well. So from that standpoint, it was eye-opening. And following on from this, the question was asked of these students whether they, based on their knowledge, based on their perceived knowledge of the cybersecurity industry, whether there would be, or whether they felt that it was an industry they wanted to enter into. And interestingly, only business and computing students reported strongly that they would, with the others reporting that they were very unlikely to overall. But what is of note is that within the non-computing disciplines, there were two distinct categories of individuals, those that felt quite strongly that they didn't want to enter into this industry, and those that felt quite strongly that they did, which brought the overall mean and average of those results down. So the next question we asked was whether, well, given the topics, given the different categories of topics found in the skills analysis, what those same students felt were complementing disciplines. So every student was asked the question, and what's of note here is that predominantly business, criminology, law, and IT are the ones that are selected most often, with a lesser place for educational studies and media, which when we go on to look at the next question is quite interesting with the media and educational studies, because the next question gave sample job titles that you could expect to get in the UK in the various different disciplines from a vocational qualification, with some adjustments made for to accommodate the type of students and the mix of students. And what was of note here is that whilst the responses were quite similar in that IT, business, criminology, and law type roles were selected most often, the media roles and the curriculum designer roles received significantly less responses than in the previous question, which leads me to believe that there is a general misunderstanding in the student population about the types of jobs that this could lead to within the cybersecurity industry. And that might be having an impact on the pipeline of students going into the cybersecurity industry. As particularly within education, I think it's important to note that there's a lot of opportunity for those studying in education to work alongside those in industry to develop curriculums that are more realistic and create a more realistic set of scenarios and case studies for students to work with at any one time. This is particularly true when you look at the next question, where students were asked whether they considered that the skills and knowledge that they were developing in their studies would help gain employment in the cybersecurity industry. What's of note here is that those in business had been studying cybersecurity as a standalone unit within their overall program, which was not known at the start of this research. But what is noted is that despite the expected result of a high number of computing students reporting that they felt their skills and knowledge would help them enter the industry, overall, across every single discipline that was questioned, 86% reported that they wanted to learn about cybersecurity more within any program of study. This is particularly interesting because when you think back to the first question, where they were asked to report where they had heard about it, they're hearing about this topic more and more. And it's the belief of this study that they're wanting to learn more and more about it. But there's just not enough knowledge being passed on from their teachers. They're only hearing about it in passing as a topic that they want. So from this, I think there's definitely an opportunity to explore in more detail, particularly within teacher education programs, the relationship between the skills and knowledge they're building and how that can be embedded within whatever taught curriculum. In the same way that most teachers are expected to embed maths and English in their topics, there's definitely an opportunity to start embedding cybersecurity skills, even at a basic level, within all curriculums. I think, well, from this, we can also draw the conclusion that overall there's perhaps a lack of clarity within any industry about or the relationship between cybersecurity students and non-cybersecurity students, not just about how they'd work together or how they could work together, but also about how their skills could develop into this industry, even in simple things like training and development officers within an organization, or we've talked about gamified learning, games designers and games developers working alongside cybersecurity experts to develop that content. And I think that from this, I would definitely conclude that more needs to be done to embed the topic into any taught curriculum to help break down those barriers and those stereotypes of it just being for smart, technically minded individuals, when in reality, you could say that about any curriculum. So I probably rushed through a little bit, but I'm going to open the floor up to any questions.